Aurora Leigh Book 5th Elizabeth Barrett Browning Aurora Leigh, Be Humble. Shall I hope to speak my poems in mysterious tune with man and nature? With the lava lymph that trickles from successive galaxies still drop by drop down the finger of God in still new worlds? With summer days in the that scarce dare breathe they are so beautiful. With spring's delicious trouble in the ground, tormented by the quickened blood of roots, and softly pricked by golden crocus sheaves in token of the harvest time of flowers. With winters and with autumns, and beyond with the human heart's large seasons, when it hopes and fears, joys, grieves, and loves. With all that strain of sexual passion, which devours the flesh in a sacrament of souls. With mother's breasts which, round the new-made creatures hanging there, throb luminous and harmonious like pure spheres. With multitudinous life, and finally with the great escapings of ecstatic souls, who, in a rush of too long prisoned flame, their radiant faces upward, burn away this dark of the body, issuing on a world beyond our mortal. Can I speak my verse so plainly in tune to these things and the rest that men shall feel it catch them on the quick as having the same warrant over them to hold and move them if they will or no, alike imperious as the primal rhythm of that theurgic nature? I must fail, who fail at the beginning to hold and move one man, and he my cousin, and he my friend, and he born tender, made intelligent, inclined to ponder the precipitous sides of difficult questions. Yet, obtuse to me, of me, incurious. Likes me very well, and wishes me a paradise of good looks, good means, and good digestion, but otherwise evades me, puts me off with kindness, with a tolerant gentleness, too light a book for a grave man's reading. Go, Aurora Leigh, be humble. There it is, we women are too apt to look to one, which proves a certain impotence in art. We strain our natures at doing something great, far less because it's something great to do, than haply that we, so, commend ourselves as being not small, and more appreciable to some one friend. We must have mediators betwixt our highest conscience and the judge. Some sweet saint's blood must quicken in our palms, or all the life in heaven seems slow and cold. Good only being perceived as the end of good, and God alone pleased, that's too poor, we think, and not enough for us by any means. Omni, I remember, told me once we miss the abstract when we comprehend. We miss it most when we aspire, and fail. Yet, so, I will not. This vile woman's way of trailing garments shall not trip me up. I'll have no traffic with the personal thought in art's pure temple. Must I work in vain, without the approbation of a man? It cannot be. It shall not. Fame itself, that approbation of the general race, presents a poor end. Though the arrow speed shot straight with vigorous finger to the white, and the highest fame was never reached except by what was aimed above it. Art for art, and good for God himself. The essential good. We'll keep our aims sublime, our eyes erect, although our woman hands should shake and fail. And if we fail. But must we? Shall I fail? The Greeks said grandly in their tragic phrase, ampersand quo. Let no one be called happy till his death. Ampersand quo. To which I'd, let no one till his death be called unhappy. Measure not the work until the day's out and the labor done, then bring your gauges. If the day's work's scant, why, call it scant. Affect no compromise. And, in that we have nobly striven at least, deal with us nobly, women though we be, and honor us with truth if not with praise. My ballads prospered. But the ballad's race is rapid for a poet who bears weights of thought in golden image. He can stand like Atlas, in the sonnet, and support his own heavens pregnant with dynastic stars. But then he must stand still, nor take a step. In that descriptive poem called and quo. The hills, ampersand quo. The prospects were too far and indistinct. 'Tis true my critics said and quo. A fine view, that. Ampersand quo. The public scarcely cared to climb my book for even the finest, and the public's right. At trees mere firewood, unless humanized, which well the Greeks knew when they stirred its bark with close-pressed bosoms of subsiding nymphs, and made the forest rivers garrulous with babble of gods. For us, we are called to mark a still more intimate humanity in this inferior nature, or ourselves must fall like dead leaves trodden underfoot by veritable artists. Earth shut up by Adam, like a fakir in a box left too long buried, remained stiff and dry, a mere dumb corpse, till Christ the Lord came down, unlocked the doors, forced open the blank eyes, and used his kingly chrism to straighten out the leathery tongue turned back into the throat. Since when, she lives, remembers, palpitates in every limb, aspires in every breath, embraces infinite relations. Now we want no half-gods, penumphant Joves, Fauns, Naiads, Tritons, Oreads and the rest, to take possession of a senseless world to unnatural vampire uses. See the earth, the body of our body, the green earth, indubitably human like this flesh and these articulated veins through which our heart drives blood. There's not a flower of spring that dies or June but vaunts itself allied by issue and symbol, by significance and correspondence, to that spirit world outside the limits of our space and time, whereto we are bound. Let poets give it voice with human meanings, else they miss the thought, and henceforth step down lower, stand confessed instructed purely for interpreters, thrown out by an easy cowslip in the text. Even so my pastoral failed. It was a book of surface pictures, pretty, cold, and false with literal transcript, the worst done, I think, for being not ill done. Let me set my mark against such doings, and do otherwise. This strikes me. If the public whom we know could catch me at such admissions, I should pass for being right modest. Yet how proud we are, in daring to look down upon ourselves. The critics say that epics have died out with Agamemnon and the goat-nursed gods. I'll not believe it. I could never deem, as Painite did, the mythic mountaineer who traveled higher than he was born to live, and showed sometimes the goiter in his throat discoursing of an image seen through fog, that Homer's heroes measured 12 feet high. They were but men. His Helen's hair turned gray like any plain Miss Smith's who wears a front, and Hector's infant whimpered at a plume as yours last Friday at a turkey cock. All actual heroes are essential men, and all men possible heroes, every age, heroic in proportions, double-faced, looks backward and before, expects someone and claims an epos. But every age appears to souls who live in single quote. Ask Carlyle, most unheroic. Ours, for instance, ours, the thinkers scout it, and the poets abound who scorn to touch it with a fingertip, a pewter age, mixed metal, silver washed. An age of scum, spooned off the richer past, an age of patches for old gabardines, an age of mere transition, meaning not except that what succeeds must shame it quite if God please. That's wrong thinking, to my mind, and wrong thoughts make poor poems. Every age, through being beheld too close, is ill discerned by those who have not lived past it. We'll suppose Mount Athos carved, as Alexander schemed, to some colossal statue of a man. The peasants, gathering brushwood in his ear, had guessed as little as the browsing goats of form or feature of humanity up there, in fact, had traveled 5 miles off ere the giant image broke on them, full human profile, nose and chin distinct, mouth, muttering rhythms of silence up the sky and fed at evening with the blood of suns. Grand torso, hand, that flung perpetually the largesse of a silver river down to all the country pastures. 'Tis even thus with times we live in, evermore too great to be apprehended near. But poets should exert a double vision, should have eyes to see near things as comprehensively as if afar they took their point of sight, and distant things as intimately deep as if they touched them. Let us strive for this. I do distrust the poet who discerns no character or glory in his times, and trundles back his soul 500 years, past moat and drawbridge, into a castle court, to sing not of lizard or of toad alive i' the ditch there, 'twere excusable, but of some black chief, half knight, half sheep-lifter, some beauteous dame, half chattel and half queen, as dead as must be, for the greater part, the poems made on their chivalric bones. And that's no wonder, death inherits death. Nay, if there's room for poets in this world a little overgrown, I think there is. Their sole work is to represent the age, their age, not Charlemagne's, this live, throbbing age, that brawls, cheats, maddens, calculates, aspires, and spends more passion, more heroic heat, betwixt the mirrors of its drawing-rooms, than Roland with his knights at Roncesvalles. To flinch from modern varnish, coat or flounce, cry out for toe gas and the picturesque, is fatal, foolish too. King Arthur's self was commonplace to Lady Guinevere, and Camelot to minstrels seems as flat as Fleet Street to our poets. Never flinch, but still, unscrupulously epic, catch upon the burning lava of a song the full-vined, heaving, double-breasted age, that, when the next shall come, the men of that may touch the impress with reverent hand, and say ampersand quo. Behold, behold the paps we all have sucked. This bosom seems to beat still, or at least it sets ours beating. This is living art, which thus presents and thus records true life. Ampersand quo. What form is best for poems? Let me think of forms less, and the external. Trust the spirit, as sovereign nature does, to make the form, for otherwise we only imprison spirit and not embody. Inward evermore to outward, so in life, and so in art which still is life. 5 acts to make a play. And why not 15? Why not 10? Or 7? What matter for the number of the leaves, supposing the tree lives and grows? Exact the literal unities of time and place, when 'tis the essence of passion to ignore both time and place? Absurd. Keep up the fire, and leave the generous flames to shape themselves. 'Tis true the stage requires obsequiousness to this or that convention. Ampersand quo. Exit and quo. Here and quo. Enter and quo. There. The points for clapping, fixed, like Jacob's white-peeled rods before the rams, and all the close-curled imagery clipped in manner of their fleece at shearing time. Forget to prick the galleries to the heart precisely at the 4th act, culminate our 5 pyramidal acts with 1 act more, we're lost so, Shakespeare's ghost could scarcely plead against our just damnation. Stand aside. We'll muse for comfort that, last century, on this same tragic stage on which we have failed, a wigless Hamlet would have failed the same. And whosoever writes good poetry, looks just to art. He does not write for you or me, for London or for Edinburgh. He will not suffer the best critic known to step into his sunshine of free thought and self-absorbed conception and exact an inch-long swerving of the holy lines. If virtue done for popularity defiles like vice, can art, for praise or hire, still keep its splendor and remain pure art? Eschew such serfdom. What the poet writes, he writes, mankind accepts it if it suits, and that's success. If not, the poem's passed from hand to hand, and yet from hand to hand until the unborn snatch it, crying out in pity on their fathers being so dull, and that's success too. I will write no plays, because the drama, less sublime in this, makes lower appeals, submits more menially, adopts the standard of the public taste to chalk its height on, wears a dog chain round its regal neck, and learns to carry and fetch the fashions of the day to please the day, one's close on pit and boxes, who clap hands commending chiefly its docility and humor in stage tricks, or else indeed gets hissed at, howled at, stamped at like a dog, or worse, we'll say. For dogs, unjustly kicked, yell, bite at need. But if your dramatist, being wronged by some 500 nobodies because their grosser brains most naturally misjudge the fineness of his subtle wit, shows teeth in almond's breadth, protests the length of the modest phrase, ampersand quo. My gentle countryman, ampersand quo. There's something in it haply of your fault, ampersand quo. Why then, besides 500 nobodies, he'll have 5,000 and 5,000 more against him, the whole public, all the hoofs of King Saul's father's asses, in full drove, and obviously deserve it. He appealed to these, and why say more if they condemn, than if they praise him? Weep, my Aeschylus, but low and far, upon Sicilian shores. For since 'twas Athens, so I read the myth, who gave commission to that fatal weight the tortoise, cold and hard, to drop on thee and crush thee, better cover thy bold head. Shall hear the softest hum of Headland be before thy loudest protestation. Then the risk still worse upon the modern stage. I could not, for so little, accept success, nor would I risk so much, in ease and calm, for manifester gains. Let those who prize, pursue them, I stand off. And yet, forbid that any irreverent fancy or conceit should litter in the drama's throne room, where the rulers of our art, in whose full veins dynastic glories mingle, sit in strength and do their kingly work, conceive, command, and, from the imagination's crucial heat, catch up their men and women all aflame for action, all alive and forced to prove their life by living out heart, brain, and nerve, until mankind makes witness, ampersand quo. These be men as we are, ampersand quo. And vouchsafes the greeting due to Imogen and Juliet's sweetest kin on art's side. 'Tis that, honoring to its worth the drama, I would fear to keep it down to the level of the footlights. Dies no more the sacrificial goat, for Bacchus slain, his filmed eyes fluttered by the whirling white of choral vestures, troubled in his blood, while tragic voices that clenched keen as swords, leapt high together with the altar flame and made the blue air wink. The waxen mask, which set the grand still front of them, is sun upon the puckered visage of a player, the buskin, which he rose upon and moved, as some tall ship first conscious of the wind sweeps slowly past the piers, the mouthpiece, where the mere man's voice with all its breaths and breaks went sheathed in brass, and clashed on even heights its fracid thunders. These things are no more, which once were. And concluding, which is clear, the growing drama has outgrown such toys of simulated stature, face, and speech. It also peradventure may outgrow the simulation of the painted scene, boards, actors, prompters, gaslight, and costume, and take for a worthier stage the soul itself, its shifting fancies and celestial lights, with all its grand orchestral silences to keep the pauses of its rhythmic sounds. Alas, I still see something to be done, and what I do falls short of what I see, though I waste myself on doing. Long green days, worn bare of grass and sunshine, long calm nights from which the silken sleeps were fretted out, be witness for me. With no amateur's irreverent haste and busy idleness I set myself to art. What then? What's done? What's done, at last? Behold, at last, a book. If life-blood's necessary, which it is, by that blue vein athrope on Mahomet's brow, each prophet poet's book must show man's blood. If life-blood's fertilizing, I wrong mine on every leaf of this, unless the drops slid heavily on one side and left it dry. That chances often. Many a fervid man writes books as cold and flat as graveyard stones from which the lichens scraped. And if Saint Peru had written his own letters, as he might, we had never wept to think of the little mole 'neath Julie's drooping eyelid. Passion is but something suffered, after all. While art sets action on the top of suffering, the artist's part is both to be and do, transfixing with a special, central power the flat experience of the common man, and turning outward, with a sudden wrench, half agony, half ecstasy, the thing he feels the inmost, never felt the less because he sings it. Does a torch less burn for burning next reflectors of blue steel, that he should be the colder for his place twixt two incessant fires, his personal life's in that intense refraction which burns back perpetually against him from the round of crystal conscience he was born into if artist born? O sorrowful great gift conferred on poets, of a twofold life, when one life has been found enough for pain. We, staggering neath our burden as mere men, being called to stand up straight as demigods, support the intolerable strain and stress of the universal, and send clearly up, with voices broken by the human sob, our poems to find rhymes among the stars. But soft, and quo, poet and quo, is the word soon said, a book's a thing soon written. Nay, indeed, the more the poet shall be questionable, the more unquestionably comes his book. And this of mine, well, granting to myself some passion in it, for rowing up the flats, mere passion will not prove a volume worth its gall and rags even. Bubbles round a keel mean naught, excepting that the vessel moves. There's more than passion goes to make a man or book, which is a man too. I am sad. I wonder if Pygmalion had these doubts and, feeling the hard marbile first relent, grow supple to the straining of his arms, and tingle through its cold to his burning lip, supposed his senses mocked, supposed the toil of stretching past the known and seen to reach the archetypal beauty out of sight, had made his heart beat fast enough for two, and with his own life dazed and blinded him. Not so? Pygmalion loved, and who so loves believes the impossible. But I am sad, I cannot thoroughly love a work of mine, since none seems worthy of my thought and hope more highly mated. He has shot them down, my Phoebus Apollo, soul within my soul, who judges, by the attempted, what's attained, and with the silver arrow from his height has struck down all my works before my face while I said nothing. Is there aught to say? I called the artist but a greatened man. He may be childless also, like a man. I'll labored on alone. The wind and dust and sun of the world beat blistering in my face. And hope, now for me, now against me, dragged my spirits onward, as some fallen balloon, which, whether caught by blossoming tree or bare, is torn alike. I sometimes touched my aim, or seemed, and generous souls cried out and quo. Be strong, take courage. Now you're on our level, now. The next step saves you. Ampersand quo. I was flushed with praise, but, pausing just a moment to draw breath, I could not choose but murmur to myself ampersand quo. Is this all? All that's done? And all that's gained? If this then be success, 'tis die smaller than any failure. Ampersand quo. O my God, O supreme artist, who a sole return for all the cosmic wonder of thy work, demandest of us just a word. A name, ampersand quo. My Father. Ampersand quo. Thou hast knowledge, only thou. How dreary 'tis for women to sit still, on winter nights by solitary fires, and hear the nations praising them far off, too far. Praising our quick sense of love, our very heart of passionate womanhood, which could not beat so in the verse without being present also in the unkissed lips and eyes undried because there's none to ask the reason they grew moist. To sit alone and think for comfort how, that very night, affianced lovers, leaning face to face with sweet half-listenings for each other's breath, are reading haply from a page of ours, to pause with a thrill as if their cheeks had touched when such a stanza, level to their mood, seems floating their own thought out and quo. So I feel for thee, ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. And I, for thee, this poet knows what everlasting love is. Ampersand quo. How, that night, some father, issuing from the misty roads upon the luminous round of lamp and hearth and happy children, having caught up first the youngest there until it shrink and shriek to feel the cold chin prick its dimples through with winter from the hills, may throw ye the lap of the eldest who has learned to drop her lids to hide some sweetness newer than last year's our book and cry. Quo. Are you care for rhymes? So here be rhymes to pour on under trees, when April comes to let you. I've been told they are not idle as so many are, but set hearts beating pure as well as fast. 'Tis yours, the book. I'll write your name in it, that so you may not lose, however lost in poet's lore and charming reverie, the thought of how your father thought of you in riding from the town. Quo. To have our books appraised by love, associated with love, while we sit loveless. Is it hard, you think? At least 'tis mournful. Fame, indeed, 'twas said, means simply love. It was a man said that, and then, there's love and love, the love of all. To risk and turn a woman's paradox is but a small thing to the love of one. You bid a hungry child be satisfied with the heritage of many cornfields, nay, he says he's hungry, he would rather have that little barley cake you keep from him while reckoning up his harvests. So with us here, Romney, too, we fail to generalize, we're hungry. Hungry. But it's pitiful to wail like unweaned babes and suck our thumbs because we're hungry. Who, in all this world wherein we are happily set to pray and fast and learn what good is by its opposite, has never hungered? Woe to him who has found the meal enough. If Ugolino's full, his teeth have crunched some foul and natural thing, for here satiety proves penury more utterly irremediable. And since we needs must hunger, better, for man's love, than God's truth. Better, for companions sweet, than great convictions. Let us bear our weights, preferring dreary hearts to desert souls. Well, well. They say we're envious, we who rhyme. But I, because I am a woman perhaps and so I'm ill at envying. I never envied Graham his breadth of style, which gives you, with a random smudge or two, near-sighted critics analysts to smudge, such delicate perspectives of full life, nor Belmore, for the unity of aim to which he cuts his sea-darn poems, finest sketchers do their pencils, nor Margage, for that caressing color and trancing tone whereby you are swept away and melted in the sensual element, which with a back way restores you to the level of pure souls and leaves you with plotness. None of these, for native gifts or popular applause, I've envied. But for this, that when by chance says someone, quo. There goes Belmore, a great man. He leaves clean work behind him, and requires no sweeper up of the chips, quo. A girl I know, who answers nothing, save with her brown eyes, smiles unaware as if a guardian saint smiled in her, for this, too, that Gage comes home and lays his last book's prodigal review upon his mother's knee, where, years ago, he laid his childish spelling book and learned to chirp and peck the letters from her mouth, as young birds must. Quo. Well done, quo. She murmured then. She will not say it now more wonderingly, and yet the last quo. Well done quo. Will touch him more, as catching up today and yesterday in a perfect chord of love, and so, Margage, I envy you your mother. And you, Graham, because you have a wife who loves you so, she half forgets, at moments, to be proud of being Graham's wife, until a friend observes, quo. The boy here has his father's massive brow done small in wax. If we push back the curls, quo. Who loves me? Dearest father, mother sweet, I speak the names out sometimes by myself, and make the silence shiver. They sound strange, as Hindustani to an inborn man accustomed many years to English speech. Or lovely poet words grown obsolete, which will not leave off singing. Up in heaven I have my father, with my mother's face beside him in a blotch of heavenly light. No more for earth's familiar, household use, no more. The best verse written by this hand can never reach them where they sit, to seem well done to them. Death quite unfellows us, sets dreadful odds betwixt the live and dead, and makes us part as those that babbled did through sudden ignorance of a common tongue. A living Cassar would not dare to play at bowls with such as my dead father is. And yet this may be less so than appears, this change and separation. Sparrows 5 for just 2 farthings, and God cares for each. If God is not too great for little cares, is any creature, because gone to God? I've seen some men, voracious, nowise mad, who have thought or dreamed, declared and testified they heard the dead a-ticking like a clock which strikes the hours of the eternities, beside them, with their natural ears, and known that human spirits feel the human way and hate the unreasoning awe which waves them off from possible communion. It may be. At least, earth separates as well as heaven. For instance, I have not seen Leigh full 18 months. Add 6, you get 2 years. They say he's very busy with good works, has parted Leigh Hall into almshouses. He made one day an almshouse of his heart, which ever since is loose upon the latch for those who pull the string. I never did. It always makes me sad to go abroad, and now I'm sadder that I went tonight among the lights and talkers at Lord Howe's. His wife is gracious, with her glossy braids, and even voice, and gorgeous eyeballs, calm as her other jewels. If she's somewhat cold, who wonders, when her blood has stood so long in the ducal reservoir? She calls her line by no means arrogantly. She's not proud. Not prouder than the swan is of the lake he has always swum in. 'Tis her element. And so she takes it with a natural grace, ignoring tadpoles. She just knows perhaps there are who travel without outriders, which isn't her fault. Ah, to watch her face, when good Lord Howe expounds his theories of social justice and equality. 'Tis curious, what a tender, tolerant bend her neck takes, for she loves him, likes his talk, ampersand quo. Such clever talk that dear, odd Algernon. Ampersand quo. She listens on, exactly as if he talked some Scandinavian myth of Lemures, too pretty to dispute, and too absurd. She's gracious to me as her husband's friend, and would be gracious were I not a Leigh, being used to smile just so, without her eyes, on Joseph Strangways the Leeds mesmerist, and Delia Dobbs the lecturer from N quo. The States N quo. Upon the N quo. Woman's question. Ampersand quo. Then, for him, I like him. He's my friend. And all the rooms were full of crinkling silks that swept about the fine dust of most subtle courtesies. What then? Why then, we come home to be sad. How lovely, one I love not look tonight. She's very pretty, Lady Valdemar. Her maid must use both hands to twist that coil of tresses, then be careful lest the rich bronze rounds should slip. She missed, though, a gray hair. A single one, I saw it. Otherwise the woman looked immortal. How they told, those alabaster shoulders and bare breasts, on which the pearls, drowned out of sight and milk, were lost, excepting for the ruby clasp. They split the amaranth velvet bodice down to the waist or nearly, with the audacious press of full-breathed beauty. If the heart within were half as white. But, if it were, perhaps the breast were closer covered and the sight less respectable by half, too. I heard the young man with the German students look a sharp face, like a knife in a cleft stick, which shot up straight against the parting line so equally dividing the long hair, say softly to his neighbor, 35 and Diavel, ampersand quo. Look that way, Sir Blaise. She's Lady Valdemar to the left and read, whom Leigh, our ablest man just now, is soon about to marry. Ampersand quo. Then replied Sir Blaise Delorme, with quiet, priest-like voice, too used to syllable damnations round to make a natural emphasis worthwhile, ampersand quo. Is Leigh your ablest man? The same, I think, once jilted by a recreant pretty maid adopted from the people. Now, in change, he seems to have plucked a flower from the other side of the social hedge. Quo. Quo. A flower, quo, exclaimed my German student, his own eyes full-blown bent on her. He was 20, certainly. Sir Blaise resumed with gentle arrogance, as if he had dropped his arms into a hat and gained the right to counsel. Quo. My young friend, I doubt your ablest man's ability to get the least good or help meet for him, for pagan philanthropy or Christian home, from such a flowery creature. Quo. Quo. Beautiful. Quo. My student murmured rapt. Quo. Mark how she stirs. Just waves her head, as if a flower indeed, touched far off by the vain breath of our talk. Quo. At which that bilious Grimwald, he who writes for the Renovator, who had seemed absorbed upon the table book of autographs, I dare say mentally he crunched the bones of all those writers, wishing them alive to feel his tooth in earnest, turned short round with low carnivorous laugh. Quo. A flower, of course. She neither sews nor spins, and takes no thought of her garments falling off. Quo. The student flinched. Sir Blaise, the same. Then both, drawing back their chairs as if they spied black beetles on the floor, pursued their talk, without a word being thrown to the critic. Good Sir Blaise's brow is high and noticeably narrow. A strong wind, you fancy, might unroof him suddenly, and blow that great top attic off his head so piled with feudal relics. You admire his nose and profile, though you miss his chin. But, though you miss his chin, you seldom miss his bone cross worn innermostly, carved for penance by a saintly Styrian monk whose flesh was too much with him, slipping through some unaware and buttoned casualty of the under-waistcoat. With an absent air Sir Blaise sat fingering it and speaking low, while I, upon the sofa, heard it all. Quo. My dear young friend, if we could bear our eyes, like blessed as Saint Lucy, on a plate, they would not trick us into choosing wives, as doublets, by the color. Otherwise our fathers chose, and therefore, when they had hung their household keys about a lady's waist, the sense of duty gave her dignity. She kept her bosom wholly to her babes, and, if a moralist reproved her dress, 'twas too much starch, and not too little lawn. Quo. Quo. Now, Shaw. Quo. Returned the other in a heat, a little fretted by being called and quo. Young friend. Quo. Or so I took it. Quo. For Saint Lucy's sake, if she's the saint to swear by, let us leave our fathers, plagued enough about our sons. Quo. He stroked his beardless chin. Quo. Yes, plagued, sir, plagued. The future generations lie on us as heavy as the nightmare of a seer. Our meat and drink grow painful prophecy. I ask you, have we leisure, if we liked, to hollow out our weary hands to keep your intermittent rushlight of the past from drafts and lobbies? Prejudice of sex and marriage law. The socket drops then through all we two speak, however may protest some over-delicate nostrils like your own, gainst odors thence arising. Quo. Quo. You are young. Quo. Sir Blaise objected. Quo. If I am, quo. He said with fire. Quo. Though somewhat less so than I seem, the young run on before, and see the thing that's coming. Reverence for the young, I cry. In that new church for which the world's near ripe, you'll have the younger in the elder's chair, presiding with his ivory front of hope o'er foreheads clawed by cruel carrion birds of life's experience. Quo. Quo. Pray your blessing, sir, Ampersand quo. Sir Blaise replied good-humoredly, Ampersand quo. I plucked a silver hair this morning from my beard, which left me your inferior. Would I were 18 and worthy to admonish you. If young men of your order run before to see such sights as sexual prejudice and marriage law dissolved, in plainer words, a general concubinage expressed in a universal pruriency, the thing is scarce worth running fast for, and you'd gain by loitering with your elders. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Ah, ampersand quo. He said, ampersand quo. Who, getting to the top of Pisgah Hill, can talk with one at bottom of the view, to make it comprehensible? Why, Leigh himself, although our ablest man, I said, is scarce advanced to see as far as this, which some are. He takes up imperfectly the social question by one handle, leaves the rest to trail. A Christian socialist is Romney Leigh, you understand. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Not I disbelieve in Christian pagans, much as you in women fishes. If we mix two colors, we lose both, and make a third distinct from either. Mark you. To mistake a color is the sign of a sick brain, and mine, I thank the saints, is clear and cool. A neutral tint is here impossible. The Church, and by the Church I mean, of course, the Catholic, Apostolic, Mother Church, draws lines as plain and straight as her own walls, inside of which are Christians, obviously. And outside, dogs. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. We thank you. Well, I know the ancient Mother Church would fain still bite, for all her toothless gums, as Leigh himself would fain be a Christian still, for all his wit. Pass that. You two may settle it, for me. You're slow in England. In a month I learned at Göttingen enough philosophy to stock your English schools for 50 years. Pass that, too. Here alone, I stop you short. Supposing a true man like Leigh could stand unequal in the stature of his life to the height of his opinions. Choose a wife because of a smooth skin? Not he, not he. He'd rail at Venus' self for creaking shoes, unless she walked his way of righteousness, and if he takes a Venus meretrix, no imputation on the lady there, be sure that, by some sleight of Christian art, he has metamorphosed and converted her to a blessed virgin. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Soft. Ampersand quo. Sir Blaise drew breath as if it hurt him. Ampersand quo. Soft. No blasphemy, I pray you. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. The first Christians did the thing, why not the last? Ampersand quo. Asked he of Göttingen, with just that shade of sneering on the lip compensates for the lagging of the beard. Ampersand quo. And so the case is. If that fairest fair is talked of as the future wife of Leigh, she's talked of too, at least as certainly, as Leigh's disciple. You may find her name on all his missions and commissions, schools, asylums, hospitals. He had her down, with other ladies whom your starry light persuaded from their spheres, to his country place in Shropshire, to the famed Philanstry at Leigh Hall, Christianized from Fourier Zone, in which he has planted out his sapling stalks of knowledge into social nurseries, and there, they say, she has tarried half a week, and milked the cows, and churned, and pressed the curd, and said my sister to the lowest drab of all the assembled castaways. Such girls, sided with them at the washing tub conceive, Sir Blaise, those naked perfect arms, round glittering arms, plunged elbow deep in suds, like wild swans hid in lilies all a-shake. Ampersand quo. Lord, how came up? Ampersand quo. What, talking poetry so near the image of the unfavoring muse? That's you, Miss Leigh. I've watched you half an hour precisely as I watched the statue called a palace in the Vatican. You mind the face, Sir Blaise? Intensely calm and sad, as wisdom cut it off from fellowship, but that spoke louder. Not a word from you. And these two gentlemen were bold, I marked, and unabashed by even your silence. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Ah, ampersand quo. Said I, ampersand quo. My dear Lord Howe, you shall not speak to a printing woman who has lost her place, the sweet safe corner of the household fire behind the heads of children, compliments, as if she were a woman. We who have clipped the curls before our eyes may see at least as plain as men do. Speak out, man to man. No compliments, beseech you. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Friend to friend, let that be. We are sad tonight, I saw. Good night, Sir Blaze. Ah, Smith, he has slipped away. I saw you across the room, and stayed, Miss Leigh, to keep a crowd of lion hunters off, with faces toward your jungle. There were 3. A spacious lady, 5 feet 10 and fat, who is the devil in her, and there's room for walking to and fro upon the earth, from Japua to China. She requires your autograph upon a tinted leaf twixt Queen Pomares and Emperor Suluk's. Pray give it. She has energies, though fat, for me. I'd rather see a rig on fire than such a woman angry. Then a youth fresh from the backwoods, green as the underboughs, asks modestly, Miss Leigh, to kiss your shoe, and adds, he has an epic in 12 parts, which when you've read, you'll do it for his boot, all which I saved you, and absorb next week both manuscript and man, because the Lord is still more potent than a poetess with any extreme republican. Ah, ah. You smile, at last, then. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Thank you. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Leave the smile. I'll lose the thanks for single quote and throw you in my transatlantic girl, with golden eyes, that draw you to her splendid whiteness as the pistil of a water lily draws, adust with gold. Those girls across the sea are tyrannously pretty, and I swore she seemed to me an innocent, frank girl. To bring her to you for a woman's kiss, not now, but on some other day or week, we'll call it perjury. I give her up. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. No, bring her. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Now, ampersand quo. Said he. Ampersand quo. You make it hard to touch such goodness with a grimy palm. I thought to tease you well, and fret you cross, and steal myself, when rightly vexed with you, for telling you a thing to tease you more. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Of Romney? Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. No, no. Nothing worse. Ampersand quo. He cried, ampersand quo. Of Romney Lee, then what is buzz about, that he is taken in an eye trap too, like many half as wise. The thing I mean refers to you, not him. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Refers to me. Ampersand quo. He echoed, ampersand quo. Me. You sounded like a stone dropped down a dry well very listlessly by one who never thinks about the toad alive at the bottom. Presently perhaps you'll sound your me more proudly till I shrink. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Lord, how's the toad, then, in this question? Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Brief, we'll take it graver. Give me sofa room, and quiet hearing. You know Eglinton, John Eglinton, of Eglinton in Kent? Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Is he the toad? He's rather like the snail, known chiefly for the house upon his back. Divide the man in halves, you kill the man. That's Eglinton of Eglinton, Lord Howe. Ampersand quo. He answered grave. Ampersand quo. A reputable man, an excellent landlord of the olden stamp, if somewhat slack in new philanthropies, who keeps his birthdays with a tenant's dance, is hard upon them when they miss the church or hold their children back from catechism, but not ungentle when you get poor picksticks at hedge sides. Nay, I've heard him say the old dame has a twinge because she stoops. That's punishment enough for felony. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. O tender-hearted landlord. May I take my long lease with him, when the time arrives for gathering winter faggots? Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. He likes art, buys books and pictures of a certain kind, neglects no patent duty, a good son and quo. Ampersand quo. To a most obedient mother, born to wear his father's shoes, he wears her husband's too. Indeed I've heard it's touching. Dear Lord, how you shall not praise me so against your heart, when I'm at worst for praise and faggots. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Be less bitter with me, for, in short, ampersand quo. He said, ampersand quo. I have a letter, which he urged me so to bring you. I could scarcely choose but yield, insisting that a new love, passing through the hand of an old friendship, caught from it some reconciling odor. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Love, you say? My lord, I cannot love, I only find the rhyme for love, and that's not love, my lord. Take back your letter. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. Pause, you'll read it first. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. I will not read it, it is stereotyped. The same he wrote to anybody's name, and Blythe the actress, when she died so true, a duchess fainted in a private box, Pauline the dancer, after the great pie in which her little feet winked overhead like other fireflies, and amazed the pit, or Baldinacci, when her effinaud had touched the silver tops of heaven itself with such a pungent spirit dart, the queen laid softly, each to each, her white-gloved palms, and sighed for joy, or else I thank your friend Aurora Leigh, when some indifferent rhymes, like those the boys sang round the holy ox on Memphis highway, chance perhaps to set our peace public lowing. Oh, he wants, instead of any worthy wife at home, a star upon his stage of Eglantine? Advise him that he is not over-shrewd in being so little modest. A dropped star makes bitter waters, says a book I've read, and there's his unread letter. Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. My dear friend, ampersand quo. Lord Howe began. In haste I taught the phrase. Ampersand quo. You mean your friend of Eglantine, or me? Ampersand quo. Ampersand quo. I mean you, ampersand quo. He answered with some fire. Ampersand quo. A happy life means prudent compromise. The tarry runs through the farmer's garnered sheaves, and though the gleaner's apron holds pure wheat we count her purer. Tarry with wheat, we cry, and good with drawbacks. You love your art, and, certain of vocation, set your soul on utterance. Only, in this world we have made, they say God made it first, but if he did 'twas so long since, and, since we have spoiled it so, he scarce would know it, if he looked this way, from hells we preach of, with the flames blown out, in this bad, twisted, topsy-turvy world where all the heaviest wrongs get uppermost, in this uneven, unfostering England here, where ledger strokes and sword strokes count indeed, but soul strokes merely tell upon the flesh they strike from, it is hard to stand for art, unless some golden tripod from the sea be fished up, by Apollo's divine chance, to throne such feet as yours, my prophetess, at Delphi. Think, the god comes down as fierce as 20 bloodhounds, shakes you, strangles you, until the oracular shriek shall lose in froth. At best 'tis not all ease, at worst too hard, a place to stand on is a vantage gained, and here's your tripod. To be plain, dear friend, you're poor, except in what you richly give? You labor for your own bread painfully, or ere you pour our wine. For art's sake, pause. Ampersand quo. I answered slow, as some wayfaring man, who feels himself at night too far from home, makes steadfast face against the bitter wind. Ampersand quo. Is art so less a thing than virtues, that artists first must cater for their ease, or ever they make issue past themselves to generous use? Alas, and is it so that we, who would be somewhat clean, must sweep our ways as well as walk them, and no friend confirm us nobly, leave results to God, but you, be keen. What? Prudent compromise makes acceptable life, you say instead, you, Lord how? In things indifferent, well. For instance, compromise the wheaten bread for rye, the meat for lentils, silk for serge, and sleep on down, if needs, for sleep on straw. But there, end compromise. I will not bait one artist's dream on straw or down, my lord, nor pinch my liberal soul, though I be poor, nor cease to love high, though I live thus low. Ampersand quo. So speaking, with less anger in my voice than sorrow, I rose quickly to depart. While he, thrown back upon the noble shame of such high stumbling natures, murmured words, the right words after wrong ones. Ah, the man is worthy, but so given to entertain impossible plans of superhuman life, he sets his virtues on so raised a shelf, to keep them at the grand millennial height, he has to mount a stool to get at them. And, meantime, lives on quite the common way, with everybody's morals. As we passed, Lord Howe insisting that his friendly arm should oar me across the sparkling brawling stream which swept from room to room, we fell at once on Lady Valdemar. Ampersand quo. Miss Leigh, ampersand quo, she said, and gave me such a smile, so cold and bright, as if she tried it in a tiring glass and liked it. Ampersand quo. All tonight I've strained at you as babes at baubles held up out of reach by spiteful nurses never snatch, they say, and there you sat, most perfectly shut in by good Sir Blaze and clever Mr. Smith and then our dear Lord Howe. At last indeed I almost snatched. I have a world to speak about your cousin's place in Shropshire, where I've been to see his work. Our work, you heard I went? And of a letter yesterday, in which if I should read a page or two you might feel interest, though you're locked of course in literary toil. You'll like to hear your last book lies at the Phalanstery, as judged innocuous for the elder girls and younger women who still care for books. We all must read, you see, before we live, till slowly the ineffable light comes up and, as it deepens, drowns the written word, so said your cousin, while we stood and felt a sunset from his favorite beech tree seat. He might have been a poet if he would, but then he saw the higher thing at once and climbed to it. I think he looks well now, has quite got over that unfortunate. Ah. I know it moved you. Tender heart. You took a liking to the wretched girl? Perhaps you thought the marriage suitable, who knows? A poet hankers for romance, and so on. As for Ronnie Leigh, 'tis sure he never loved her, never. By the way, you have not heard of her. Quite out of sight, and out of saving? Lost in every sense? Ampersand quo. She might have gone on talking half an hour and I stood still, and cold, and pale, I think, as a garden statue child pelts with snow for pretty pastime. Every now and then I put in and quo. Yes and quo. Or and quo. No, ampersand quo. I scarce knew why. The blind man walks wherever the dog pulls, and so I answered. Till Lord Howe broke in, ampersand quo. What penance takes the wretch who interrupts the talk of charming women? I, at last, must brave it. Pardon, Lady Valdemar, the lady on my arm is tired, unwell, and loyally I've promised she shall say no harder word this evening than good night. The rest her face speaks for her. Ampersand quo. Then we went, and I breathed large at home. I dropped my cloak, unclasped my girdle, loosed the band that ties my hair. Now could I but unloose my soul. We are sepulchred alive in this close world, and want more room. The charming woman there this reckoning up and writing down her talk affects me singularly. How she talked to pain me. Woman's spite. You wear steel mail, a woman takes a housewife from her breast and plucks the delicatest needle out as 'twere a rose, and pricks you carefully neath nails, neath eyelids, in your nostrils. Say, a beast would roar so tortured, but a man, a human creature, must not, shall not flinch, no, not for shame. What vexes, after all, is just that such as she, with such as I, knows how to vex. Sweet heaven, she takes me up as if she had fingered me and augured me and spelled me by the fireside half her life. She knows my turns, my feeble points. What then? The knowledge of a thing implies the thing. Of course, she found that in me, she saw that, her pencil underscored this for a fault, and I, still ignorant, shut the book up, close, and crushed that beetle in the leaves. O heart, at last we shall grow hard too, like the rest, and call it self-defense because we are soft. And after all, now, why should I be pained that Leigh, my cousin, should espouse this Lady Valdemar? And, say, she held her newly blossomed gladness in my face. 'Twas natural surely, if not generous, considering how, when winter held her fast, I helped the frost with mine, and pained her more than she pains me. Pains me. But wherefore paint? 'Tis clear my cousin Romney wants a wife, so, good. The man's need of the woman, here, is greater than the woman's of the man, and easier served. For where the man discerns a sex, the man can generalize, said he, we see but one, ideally and really, where we yearn to lose ourselves and melt like white pearls in another's wine, he seeks to double himself by what he loves, and make his drink more costly by our pearls. At board, at bed, at work and holiday, it is not good for man to be alone, and that's his way of thinking, first and last, and thus my cousin Romney wants a wife. But then my cousin sets his dignity on personal virtue. If he understands by love, like others, self-aggrandizement, it is that he may verily be great by doing rightly and kindly. Once he thought, for charitable ends set duly forth in heaven's wide judgment book, to marry. We'll call her name Aurora Leigh, although she's changed since then. And once, for social ends, poor Marian Earl, my sister Marian Earl, my woodland sister, sweet maid Marian, whose memory moans on in me like the wind through ill-shut casements, making me more sad than ever I find reasons for. Alas, poor pretty plaintive face, embodied ghost. He finds it easy then, to clap thee off from pulling at his sleeve and book and pen. He locks thee out at night into the cold away from budding with thy horny eyes against his crystal dreams, that now he's strong to love anew? That Lady Valdemar succeeds my Marian? After all, why not? He loved not Marian, more than once he loved Aurora. If he loves at last that third, albeit she prove as slippery as spilt oil on marble floors, I will not augur him ill luck for that. Good love, however ill-placed, is better for a man's soul in the end, that if he loved ill what deserves love well. A pagan, kissing for a step of Pan the wild goat's hoof print on the loamy down, exceeds our modern thinker who turns back the strata. Granite, limestone, coal, and clay, concluding coldly with unquo. Here's law. Where's God? Ampersand quo. And then at worst, if Romney loves her not, At worst, if he's incapable of love, which may be then indeed, for such a man incapable of love, she's good enough. For she, at worst too, is a woman still and loves him as the sort of woman can. My loose long hair began to burn and creep, alive to the very ends, about my knees. I swept it backward as the wind sweeps flame, with the passion of my hands. Ah, Romney laughed one day. How full the memories come up. Quo. Your Florence fireflies live on in your hair. Quo. He said. Quo. It gleams so. Quo. Well, I wrung them out, my fireflies. Made a knot as hard as life of those loose, soft, impracticable curls, and then sat down and thought. Quo. She shall not think her thought of me. Quo. And drew my desk and wrote. Quo. Dear Lady Valdemar, I could not speak with people round me, nor can sleep tonight or not speak, after the great news I heard of you and of my cousin. May you be most happy, and the good he meant the world replenish his own life. Say what I say, and let my word be sweeter for your mouth, as you are you. I only Aurora Leigh. Quo. That's quiet, guarded, though she hold it up against the light, she'll not see through it more than lies there to be seen. So much for pride. And now for peace, a little. Let me stop all writing back. Quo. Sweet thanks, my sweetest friend, you've made more joyful my great joy itself. Quo. No, that's too simple. She would twist it thus. Quo. My joy would still be as sweet as time in drawers, however shut up in the dark and dry. But violets, aired and dewed by love like yours, outsmell all time. We keep that in our clothes, but drop the other down our bosoms till they smell like an quo. Ah, I see her writing back just so. She'll make a nosegay of her words, and tie it with blue ribbons at the end to suit a poet. Pshaw. And then we'll have the call to church, the broken, sad, bad dream dreamed out at last, the marriage vow complete with the marriage breakfast. Praying in white gloves, drawn off in haste for drinking pagan toast and somewhat stronger wine than any sipped by God since Bacchus had his way with grapes. A postscript stops all that and rescues me. Quo. You need not write. I have been overworked, and think of leaving London, England even, and hastening to get nearer to the sun where men sleep better. So, adieu. Quo. I fold and seal, and now I'm out of all the coil. I breathe now. I spring upward like a branch the 10-years schoolboy with a crooked stick may pull down to his level in search of nuts, but cannot hold a moment. How we twine back on the blue sky, and assert our height, while he stares after. Now, the wonder seems that I could wrong myself by such a doubt. We poets always have uneasy hearts, because our hearts, large rounded as the globe, can turn but one side to the sun at once. We are used to dip our artist hands in gall and potash, trying potentialities of alternated color, till at last we get confused, and wonder for our skin how nature tinged it first. Well, here's the true good flesh color. I recognize my hand, which Romney Leigh may clasp as just a friend's, and keep his clean. And now, my Italy. Alas, if we could write with naked souls and make no noise and pay no price at all, I would have seen thee sooner, Italy, for still I have heard thee crying through my life, thou piercing silence of ecstatic graves, men call that name. But even a witch today must melt down golden pieces in the nard wherewith to anoint her broomstick ere she rides. And poets evermore are scant of gold, and if they find a piece behind the door it turns by sunset to a withered leaf. The devil himself scarce trusts his patented gold-making art to any who make rhymes, but cults his fostas from philosophers and not from poets. Quo. Leave my Job, quo, said God. And so the devil leaves him without pence, and poverty proves plainly special grace. In these new, just, administrative times men clamor for an order of merit. Why? Here's black bread on the table and no wine. At least I am a poet in being poor, thank God. I wonder if the manuscript of my long poem, if 'twere sold outright, would fetch enough to buy me shoes to go afoot. Thrown in, the necessary patch for the other side the Alps. It cannot be. I fear that I must sell this residue of my father's books, although the Elzevers have fly leaves overwritten by his hand and faded notes as thick and fine and brown as cobwebs on a tawny monument of the old Greeks conferenda hac cum his corruptessit at leg podius, and so on, in the scholar's regal way of giving judgment on the parts of speech, as if he sat on all 12 thrones uppiled, arraigning Israel. But books and notes must go together. And this precludes too, in these dear quaint contracted Grecian types, fantastically crumpled like his thoughts, which would not seem too plain. You go round twice for one step forward, then you take it back because you're somewhat giddy. There's the rule for precluse. I stained this middle leaf with pressing in single quote my Florence Iris Bell, long stalk and all. My father chided me for that stain of blue blood. I recollect the peevish turn his voice took, quo. Silly girls, who plant their flowers in our philosophy to make it fine, and only spoil the book. No more of it, Aurora. Quo. Yes, no more. Blame of love, that's sweeter than all praise of those who love not. 'Tis so lost to me, I cannot, in such beggared life, afford to lose my precluse, not for Florence even. The kissing Judas, wolf, shall go instead, who builds us such a royal book as this to honor a chief poet, folio built, and writes above and quo. The house of nobody. Quo. Who floats in cream, as rich as any sucked from Juno's breasts, the broad Homeric lines, and, while with their spondaic prodigious mouths they lap the loosened margins as babe gods, proclaims them bastards. Wolf's an atheist, and if the Iliad fell out, as he says, by mere fortuitous concourse of old songs, conclude as much too for the universe. That wolf, those plateaus, sweep the upper shelves as clean as this, and so I am almost rich, which means, not forced to think of being poor in sight of ends. Tomorrow, no delay. I'll wait in Paris till good Carrington dispose of such and, having chaffered for my book's price with the publisher, direct all proceeds to me. Just a line to ask his help. And now I come, my Italy, my own hills. Are you aware of me, my hills, how I burn toward you? Do you feel tonight the urgency and yearning of my soul, as sleeping mothers feel the sucking babe and smile? Nay, not so much as when in heat vain lightnings catch at your inviolate tops and tremble while ye are steadfast. Still ye go your own determined, calm, indifferent way toward sunrise, shade by shade, and light by light, of all the grand progression not left out, as if God verily made you for yourselves and would not interrupt your life with ours.